Puritans attend a meeting. On Sundays, Thursdays, and special feast days, Puritans attended religious services, regardless of weather. There was a fine for absenteeism, and their religious structures were at the center of the town, with houses clustered around them. Church is an improper term for the Puritans' religious structure. They called it a meeting house. Their meeting house was simple and rough-hewn. To call it a church was too Catholic in the Puritans' viewpoint, to use their term, too popish. And Puritans shunned all Catholic emblems or symbols. There were no statues or other decorations, as might be found in Catholic or Anglican churches. A weather vane with a rooster decoration rather than a cross sat atop the meeting house steeple, and it was rooted in Christian history. It reminded the congregation that even St. Peter had sinned by denying that he knew Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed on the morning that the Romans had seized Jesus. It was a reminder to never deny your faith. The sinfulness of humanity was a constant Puritan theme. Even in the graveyards, the tombstones were carved with symbols of death, skulls and crossbones. Inside the meeting house in winter, it was little warmer than outside. There may have been a fireplace, but its heat had little effect on those sitting more than just a few feet from the flames. The congregation bundled in fur blankets, but they did not fall asleep, for there were stiff fines for nodding off. People rested their feet on brass or iron foot warmers that contained coals brought from home. In towns that prohibited foot warmers as a fire hazard, some worshippers brought to the meeting a large, well-trained dog to lie at their feet. Women sat on the left side of the meeting house with their daughters. Men sat on the right side, but boys were seated around the pulpit, where a church warden would hit them with a switch if they became fidgety or mischievous. At the Puritan meeting house, the sermons went on and on. They were at least 1.5 hours long, and often as long as 3 hours. If a sermon was shorter, there was gossip about the preacher's lack of effort. An hourglass sat on the preacher's pulpit, where, when the sand ran down, it was turned by a church warden who watched over the boys. A church proctor, sometimes called a tithe master, wandered throughout the congregation with what was called a proctor's stick, a long pole with a knob at the end and a feather attached. If someone looked sleepy, the feather was tickled under their nose to wake them up, and if they had nodded off, a rap of the knob woke them up. Many took notes, some out of interest, others to stay awake. Puritans forbade organs in their meeting houses, since organs were not mentioned in the scriptures, but they loved to sing. They loved to sing the Psalms in particular. However, they did not use the standard King James Bible version of the Psalms, but rather their own Puritan version, which was called the Bay Psalm Book. These versions of the Bible were very strikingly different. Just to give you an example, let's use Psalm 137, a particular favorite of the Puritans. Psalm 137 references the Babylonian exile of the Jews, and in the psalm, the word Zion is used as a synonym for Jerusalem. Here are 3 versions. One is a current version of the Bible called the International Version of Psalm 137. This is how it reads. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked of us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." And here is the version from the King James Bible, the Bible that was produced in the early 17th century. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." And here is the Bay Psalm Book version of Psalm 137. Remember, these are all the same psalm, just presented in very different ways. Here's the Bay Psalm Book version. The rivers on of Babylon, there when we did sit down, yea, even then we mourned, when we remembered Zion. Our harps we did hang it amid upon the willow tree, because there they that us away led in captivity required of us a song, and thus asked mirth. Us waste who laid, sing us among a Sion song, unto us then they said. Morning services ended around noon, and the Puritan family returned home for a meal prepared the previous day. Puritans took their Sabbath very seriously. There was no work, no play, no sports. Even conversation was frowned upon. Talk about workaday matters was not allowed. Families only discussed the morning's sermons and other religious topics. In the afternoon, the family returned to the meeting house for another round of sermons and psalm singing. The solemnity of the religious services and the Sabbath strictness did not mean that Puritan family life was without affection, laughter, or enjoyment. Puritans loved their children, so much in fact that they eased church membership requirements in what was called the Halfway Covenant of 1657, which allowed these children, these quote-unquote less pure Puritans, into the fold, and according to Puritan historians, fatally diluted Puritanism.